So glad that you can join us this afternoon. There we go. Are you able to see this presentation? Okay, I'm going to hit the present mode. All right, so Ashley and myself, Luis, we wanted to take this opportunity to present a new initiative that we're pushing through, a sort of collaborative initiative between instructional designers and faculty members. And we call it the Eagle Online Excellence Initiative, really trying to elevate the level of quality course design within all the course offerings, which lucky for us this fall is all the courses because they're all online. So we can all elevate those courses, and we'll go through those steps. I already introduced myself. My name is Luis Alvarado, part of the learning design team, recently brought on these 5 months ago to help out with a lot of different initiatives that are happening across campus, and obviously the digital transformation that we all find ourselves in, and happy to be a part of this community.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Ashley Ricamo. I work as an instructional designer with the e-learning and support services office in the library. And I am also part of this new learning design team that has been formed this summer. So basically a team of instructional designers. We're working with the new chief online officer to offer a bunch of different services to support you in your online learning, this being one of them. So.
With that said, we thought we'd start the day. It's afternoon. Many of you have had lunch. You're kind of feeling maybe a little drowsy, so we thought we'd start this session off with a little bit of an icebreaker. Now, if you're like many of us, you have been binging shows, and one of the shows that I've personally been binging, and I'm a big fan of, Ashley, I don't know if you've seen it, Schitt's Creek.
A couple
Okay,
episodes.
okay. Schitt's Creek. Moira Rose is the main character, and she's always very fashionable, has wonderful taste in design, and so does Dennis Rodman. Also, another popular show was The Last Dance, that kind of went over Michael Jordan's rise to that championship level. So this is Mentimeter. This is a tool that you can utilize. It is free. And if you go to menti.com, you can put in that code 8607972, and you'll be able to choose which one wore it better. And if you're not familiar, there's like a thread going on in Twitter where it has a bunch of comparisons between Moira Rose and Dennis Rodman because they're both very fashionable people. I got one Moira Rose, and I think how many people do we have here? So I'll wait and let some other people answer this question. Who wore it better? Dennis Rodman or Moira Rose? I'm at least going to wait till one more person votes. Maybe Dennis Rodman gets some love, maybe not. Nice. Okay. Oh, he did get some love. I love it. That's awesome. Okay. So just a little bit of laughter to start this afternoon, but it's connected. Dennis Rodman was part of a championship team, and The Last Dance was, in my opinion, a wonderful documentary that really illustrated just the will that human capacity has to elevate ourselves, to get the most out of each other. And what's interesting about The Last Dance, and what I wanted to highlight, is Michael Jordan was always a great player. He always had the talent, but it took him a very long time, almost 10 years, almost a decade, to start to win his first championship. And it took a coaching change, but also a team change. And his mentality had to change. He had to be able to feel comfortable passing the ball. He had to be able to work as a team in order to elevate himself to that championship level basketball. And I thought it's very much a testament to what we're trying to accomplish here. In order to elevate our online course design, we cannot do this on our own. Whether it's you, the faculty member, us, the instructional designers, we need to collaboratively work together, even across campus, leveraging all those wonderful resources we have. CTRL, academic technology, this new learning design team, leveraging them across campus and collaborating on what a quality course is all about to get to that championship level, so that we can have as many rings as Dennis Rodman has. So I'm gonna exit here. Give me a second. See if I can. Okay. That was a wonderful icebreaker. Thank you for all who participated.
Okay, so we want to review real quick with you our plan for the workshop time today. So we are going to talk a little bit about quality in the online course design, why it matters, why we should care about it. What is specifically the Eagle Online Excellence Initiative? We refer to it a lot as EOE. So if you hear that, that's what we're talking about. Then we want to shift into focusing on how EOE can support you and how it connects to your personal quality goals and your courses. And then we'll end with some next steps and some resources for you. And because, you know, if you've ever taken a workshop before led by instructional designers or learning designers, one thing that we love and one thing that leads into the quality of an online course or online workshop session is learning objectives or learning outcomes. We always put some in here. So ours for today's session, by the end of today's session, we hope that you will be able to recognize the importance of a highly engaging and effective online course, identify the components of a high quality online course that match up with the standards that are laid out by the EOE initiative, and then also collaborate with colleagues on shared challenges and opportunities.
And just when you thought we were done with Mentimeter, we have another Mentimeter activity here for everyone. Give me a second. It will be the same code as last time, but this question is a little more related to EOE. And it's, what do you hope to achieve from quality course design? What do you envision? What is that top goal that you'd like to achieve when you're teaching this semester online? Again, you can go to menti.com, whether on another tab or on your phone, and put in that same code 8607972. And this is a word cloud, so it's going to ask you to type in your response, and we'll see if we have any commonalities, if any of you have similar feelings of what you want to accomplish this fall. Engage students, that's a very powerful one. Critical thinking, curiosity, yes, student engagement, absolutely. That's going to be critical. I think that's top of mind for all of us. I like curiosity though. That one's a unique one. Oof, decrease anxiety.
I think that one goes for all of us, everyone involved, right? The students, the instructors, the staff, everybody, right? We need to get to a place where we feel comfortable and streamlined and like things are going to go well.
And I think it helps realizing that you're not alone, that we're in this together as an institution, as a university. There's staff members ready to step up. I know Ashley, myself, and our team of colleagues have been stepping up in a multitude of ways to try to support faculty, and we hope to do so as the semester progresses. So it's not like, hey, we're done when the semester starts. We'll still be available and still providing resources and assistance. And student engagement. I think a lot of the principles that we talk about in this initiative is to increase that student engagement, is to also allow you to focus on that engagement so that you're not so concerned about the technology and you can focus more on the teaching. And that's ultimately our goal. I know we're having one-on-one consultations, and when we're discussing what best tools to use, it's what could be easy for you, what will allow to alleviate your time so that you can focus on that engagement for that teaching. So that's wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the other presentation. That's the one fallback on Mentimeter, is it can't be embedded into a PowerPoint presentation. It's its own presentation tool. So if you were to use it along with PowerPoint, you would have to toggle back and forth. That's the one downside. Second here. So the importance of online course design. It is absolutely essential that you have a well-structured course when you're teaching online. I think there's a lot of elements we take for granted in the physical space, and we have for decades, if not a century, of the same sort of academic style of teaching. Right? You have your desk, you have your board. Now it's a whiteboard. It used to be a chalkboard. Um, the desk vary in sizes. Sometimes you can group the desk around. But you have the physical tools available to you in that classroom. It's the same can't be said when you move online, right? It's not like suddenly you have a course ready and structured for you. We do have a template that we've provided, a blueprint template that gives you a guide and a starting place. So it provides some of that structure that's available to you on Canvas Commons if you decide to transition to Canvas this semester. But by and large, the heavy lifting when it comes to online teaching is creating that structure for your students. And what does it do? It helps allows the students to focus on the learning, right? When they're not guessing where they have to turn in an assignment or what their next reading is, when you have it laid out for them as clearly as possible, it really creates that effective environment that allows, as research has shown, for online learning to have better results than some of the face-to-face courses that teach the same topics. Almost always when online learning is a better environment, it's because it's well structured. Students don't have to guess where things are. They know the next step. And I think Canvas is just to harp on this a little bit, Canvas is a perfect tool for us navigating this new endeavor, just because it functions like Pages. So essentially a student can go through a whole course by clicking next. And that's how the modules essentially function. And so it allows them to have that progression. And if we keep that progression in mind and keep in tune with the way that system works, it's going to be a great experience for students and ultimately leads to that student success. Structure also allows you to create that community, right? By allowing yourself to have a well-structured course, you can focus your time on providing effective feedback for your students, which is such a powerful mechanism. You can focus on responding to students in their discussion boards. I think Ashley and myself, we always promote when you have a discussion board post and you're wondering why your students aren't posting as much as you'd like. We almost always start, well, are you responding in the discussion post? Is it just for students or are you participating? And oftentimes when a professor participates, it elevates the students and it makes them aware that, hey, my professor's paying attention. And so just as often as we want them logging in into the course to stay caught up, you as the professor also need to feel comfortable being involved, being logged on into the course, even if it's well structured, just checking in, posting every once in a while, checking in with students. It's really a powerful mechanism to build community. And again, virtual community is possible. We see it every day through social media applications, dating applications. People are connecting with one another, even virtually. So we have to take some of those methodologies and incorporate into our online class. It almost always starts with just being there. So structure and then being present.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the research that goes into online course design and online course structure, and why, kind of as a stepping off point for why did we introduce this initiative for online course design here at AU. So I've got some different kind of summaries of research studies that have been done looking at online course structure. And so what these studies are talking about with online course structure is the course design. So including things like a standardized layout in the online course site, things like navigation, arrangement of materials, location of information and the type of information included, and the use of tools to enhance and facilitate learning. So all of those kinds of things are grouped together under the umbrella of course structure here in these studies. And so as you can read through what's on the slide here, course experience and course structure are so important that they influence nearly all of the outcomes of a course. Things like learning, things like student engagement, things like student satisfaction, which lumped together all then impact things like enrollment and retention for your courses and for your programs in the end. So what I want to point out here with this slide and this research is that clarity and transparency and an organized course structure are crucial to student success in a course. And I think that after what happened in the spring, students are going to be smarter consumers of digital learning and have higher expectations of the structure and consistency and quality going into this fall semester than they may have been in the spring when it was just kind of thrust upon them. So this is why we're developing this initiative and sharing it with you. And yes, I saw in the chat box there was a question about the references. We do have the slide at the very end that lists all of these out. We can send these after the session. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is a study that was done I believe in the spring to early summer of this year in 2020. That is from Inside Higher Ed. I can copy the link here in Zoom or in the Zoom chat for you. And what this study was looking at was interviewing students about their spring online courses. So after the transition happened, after the live classrooms shut down for universities, they interviewed the students to figure out their satisfaction level with their courses post-COVID. And what they found in this study was that the number of instructional best practices that a faculty member used, the higher or more satisfied the students were with their course in the end. And so if you can go to the next slide, Luis.
Yes, absolutely.
This is a list of the instructional practices that they ask students about. So a lot of these overlap with what we are looking for with this EOE initiative. So they're overlapping with sort of standardized best practices in terms of online course design. So things like including authentic real-world examples that lead to active learning, things like including a variety of sources, things like communication from the instructor, things like assignments that align with learning outcomes and group work and interactivity. All of these sorts of things as we go and discuss the rubric are reflected in the EOE rubric as well. And so you can see here a direct link, very current from 2020, that the more best practices are incorporated, the more satisfied students are going to be in the end with the learning that they've received.
And just, Ashley, just to go back to the slide, just because, and I'm sure many of you have read a lot of the articles, whether Inside Higher Ed or Chronicle, that were highlighting how dissatisfied students were with their online experience this past spring. I think there's a lot of news articles kind of taking that position. I think what's really interesting is that, overwhelmingly here, students are satisfied when the best practices are incorporated. And so the real question is how many of those courses that had to be rushed to an online modality, how many of them actually incorporated any of these best practices for digital learning? I imagine not many of them. And if they were able to, and I admit that it takes time, it's not something that could be done rapidly, chances are that the articles wouldn't have been able to be written. And this sort of viewpoint that online learning is inferior wouldn't have been able to be so astutely highlighted this summer because of what happened in the spring. So I love that graphic and the corresponding best practices. And again, we're going to mention we're consistently reminding you that structure matters, right? How can you create that board, that whiteboard, those desks in the format that you want, but in that virtual environment? It really starts with thinking, how am I setting up my modules and having that consistency of what sort of assignments will I have my students do weekly? And you want there to be some consistency there as well. You don't want to switch it up too often and have discussion board one week, an assignment another week, a quiz another week, and then a final exam. You want to be able to have behaviors modeled week over week. So if you have a discussion board, see if you can have that similar discussion board week after week. You could also skip a week, but as long as it's consistent and there's some sort of pattern to the assignments that you're assigning, then that's one of those effective best practices. And again, this allows you to focus your energy on how you can help your students stay engaged, because they're not being frustrated. They're not getting frustrated with not getting the material that they need and not knowing when things are due. A huge feature, just, I know Canvas is on the mind of many. Canvas has a calendar feature that automatically updates. It's much more robust than what was available on Blackboard. It works better, I should say, than Blackboard Calendar did. And the great thing is that students can download that to their Outlook, to their Android or iPhone device. There's a button there called the calendar feed that they could click on, and it keeps them organized. And highlighting some of these organizational methodologies that are available within the technology can really be effective to help students stay engaged and know, oh crap, I got a due date coming up, and it'll ping them as typical things are set within their calendar. So I did want to highlight that. And again, you want to make connections to your students. I think this semester especially, it would be very effective to take some time to be more personal than professional. And I'm not saying you have to share your life story, but I do think it would be very powerful if you approach this semester and your students as a community, and not necessarily as a traditional course, and with traditional titles and traditional aspects, because learning science is starting to keep up, and a lot of these practices that we're harping on, structure, is connected to neuroscience and how best humans learn. And it really is modeling behavior, so you have that consistency, but then also connecting to real world issues or real world problems. And and every topic has the ability to connect to something that's going on in our world. There's not a topic, right, that exists that doesn't have something going on in current events. And ultimately, they want to get to know you, especially this semester. It's going to be an escape for them. You don't know what particular situation your students find themselves in. And maybe attending your class once a week is their escape from their reality. And take advantage of that. See that as an opportunity to really connect with your students in maybe a deeper way than you've connected previously, when you maybe took that human connection for granted. And I do want to highlight just how much equity, I know equity matters to the faculty members here at American University. And again, just to highlight an aspect of Canvas, their mobile app is very robust for students to use. They could completely go through your class, even Zoom, if they download the Zoom app using a mobile device. So again, it provides that equity, because believe it or not, not every student is going to log into your class on a computer. And not many can, and there's some students who just refuse and rather do it on their phones. I think it's kind of where we're pivoting to in online learning, is moving from a laptop device to a mobile device. So make sure you're being welcoming, make sure you're being understanding and being flexible, not only to your students, but also to yourselves this semester. So what is this Eagle Online Excellence Initiative that we created? A lot of it came from Quality Matters. Maybe some of you are familiar with that particular organization that has made it its sort of lifelong mission to elevate the level of online learning in this country. And many universities have adopted this. We decided, given our past experience in previous institutions trying to push any sort of quality initiative, that it doesn't work if we bring some sort of outside entity and then tell you, the faculty member, this is what quality is. And so I want you all to think of this Eagle Online Excellence Initiative. We do have a rubric, we do have a structure associated with it, but this is something that's living and breathing and will continue to grow as we get more faculty collaborators and as we get more stakeholders across campus to sort of buy into this process. We really think this is going to grow into something unique for AU and that's meaningful for American University. And so we decided to make something unique and tied to this institution. It's a new initiative. It's here to support you in your online course design. You can have one-on-one consultations with either Ashley or myself, and we can review your course. Preferably, and we encountered this in the summer, just to highlight, it's a completed course. We're not your course designers, but we are reviewers who will look at it and tell you what are the next steps, what you can incorporate to hit that next level of structure and engagement, and that's backed by research. And we, at the end of this presentation, there is a research slide that will be shared with you that has a lot of connections to some of the research. Ashley and I have also been working on a lit review of a lot of research across online education and sort of best practices, and connecting it with some of the requirements on the rubric, so that you can see that these requirements are connected to proven research and elevating online learning. And ultimately, it's here to assist you. It's here to create this community of practice so that you're not on your own. So we can really create that championship caliber team of education to deliver to our students. And I know that that's what they'll be wanting and desiring this semester. They might not get the traditional face-to-face experience, but it doesn't mean that they can't grow and learn through the courses that they're able to sit in, taught by you. So this is a community that we're creating. It's not just an initiative. It's not just a rubric. We want your buy-in, but we ultimately want your ideas. What we can do to improve upon this initiative, what we can do to create and formulate that community of practice so we can elevate each other across colleges, across schools, and really become one institution. So that's the ultimate goal, kind of pie in the sky, and we'll need your help achieving it. Go next slide here.
Okay, so as Luis said, EOE is a new initiative. We launched it this summer to try to support all of you guys, faculty at AU, in matching or achieving the highest possible online quality and reaching more student success for your students. Basically, as Luis talked a little bit about on the last two slides ago, kind of reducing the roadblocks for your students. And so in thinking about the EOE initiative as a whole, there are essentially three parts to it. So you heard us talking a little bit about a rubric. We mentioned it here and there at the start of this session. So what the rubric is, I'll show you in more depth in a second, but it is a rubric of a bunch of criteria divided into different categories, and it's based on research. It's based on nationally accepted best practices for online course design. And so basically, all of the goal of the rubric is to help you build a user-friendly online course. You develop something that's friendly for your students, that will reduce barriers to learning within your online course and your online course design. There are two different ways that you can use this rubric. So if you have not designed or not built your online course yet, so maybe you're not teaching this fall, you're teaching in the spring instead, and you worry maybe we'll be online for spring as well, you can use that rubric as a tool to develop your course, essentially. So if you're starting from scratch, you can use it as a checklist style to kind of build in the different elements of your course that will help your students succeed. If you already have your course built out, you can use that rubric to review this established online course. And so how that's done is through a one-on-one consultation with one of us, so either Luis or I. You can email eoe@american.edu and set up an appointment for a consultation with one of us, one of the instructional designers. And what we'll do is review your course against the rubric, discuss different recommendations on course design, and then when you've met all of the different criteria on the rubric, we can recognize your course with the new EOE Gold Badge of Distinction. So it's basically a digital badge of Eagle Online Excellence to share within your course. So we've had a couple people pass this summer, and they are using it in their course site, so on Blackboard or Canvas, and then also putting it into their course syllabus. And the EOE distinction is connected to a certain course, not necessarily to you as an instructor, because it has to do with the online course design specific to a particular course. So if you have multiple courses that you would like to get certified, we would do the same consultation and review process for each course. And then the third component of the EOE initiative is training. So we are coming up with a training program for the fall. that will include a few more webinars about online course design. And we are also working on building up micro-learning courses. So very quick kind of bites of information about the different areas of the rubric and about online course design as a whole, just so it's kind of an easily digestible piece of information for you.
Okay.
So we're going to take a kind of more in-depth look at the rubric itself. I want to go over it with you and kind of show you the different categories that are in it and what the different criteria are, and take a look at some of these things you might already be doing. Some of them might be a little bit new or kind of less straightforward. So we want to kind of go over it in detail with you.
Hold on, give me a moment here. Bringing it up.
Thanks.
No, you're welcome.
So you can see here, this is a copy of our EOE rubric. Again, this is based on research that's been done into the area of online course design and best practices, neuroscience, all of these things, and in addition, how those things help students learn. And it's based off of QM and other similar rubrics that are kind of more national entities, and then customized for you guys here at AU. So the rubric has a number of different categories on it, which are listed on the left-hand side. And then your criteria are in the right-hand side, listed out as a sort of checklist. So this can be used, as I mentioned before, for course building. If you haven't built or designed your course yet, you can kind of go through as your own and use this as a checklist. And we also use it as a checklist in our consultation process when we are reviewing a fully completed online course. So the categories on the rubric are course overview and introduction. So thinking about what types of information you're providing to your students about the course, not only the course kind of topics, but also the logistics of the course. So how do they navigate your course site? How can they contact you? What is your preferred contact? What are their expectations? What should those be for your response time? Are you providing a space to post a course schedule or post grading policies? All of these kinds of things that students are going to come into the course wanting to know, and then having that information will help them succeed in the course. Learning outcomes is the next category. So I made a kind of joke earlier about how instructional designers love learning outcomes. That's not for nothing. There's research showing that learning outcomes can help focus students' attention on what matters most in the course, and it can help them focus on the most important skills that they need to take away from your course, either to succeed maybe in future courses in a sequence, to succeed in maybe a career, or maybe in more research in that field that you're in. So what we're looking for those are that they are appropriate for the level of the course, they're written out with from the learner's perspective, and they're aligned with course activities and course assignments. So many of you guys already have these, so hopefully as you're going through and looking at this rubric for the first time, you're thinking, oh, I already have those. Oh, I already do all of that sort of stuff. There's going to be a lot of components on this rubric that you do already do.
Yeah, I want to add, Ashley, just from some of the course reviews we've been able to accomplish, we've certified over 10 courses so far past the summer, and many of them were just missing small little elements to hit the mark. So it's really fantastic, and kudos to the faculty members out there who are, you know, I know many of you are working diligently to try to make sure you're providing the best learning experience to your students.
So the third category refers to content and activities. And so I do want to point out that nothing on this rubric is really focusing on or trying to dictate anything about the course content that you choose in terms of the topics or the overall arc of the curriculum, or how you put your course content together. It's also not really focusing on delivery. What this is looking at is the overall course design. And so how content fits into that course design process is its alignment with all of the other course components. So for instance, you have a set of learning outcomes. All we're going to take a look at with the content is does that content align with those learning outcomes, right? If you're wanting them to focus on writing skills, or you may be teaching them how to write at some point. If you want them to focus on peer feedback or communication skills, is the content that you're picking going to help them to do that? So we're of course not here to tell anybody what content to put in their course, or how to teach that content in the sort of active learning space. It's more just taking a look at how you're choosing to organize the content in a productive way for students, and is it displayed well, and does it kind of get them to the end goal of achieving those learning outcomes. We'll also take a look at the course activities in your course. So basically just focusing on things like interaction, making sure that students are getting a chance to interact with each other in those learning activities. So that was one of the best practices that students really appreciated having in the spring 2020 semester after we moved online. And so that actually corresponds as well with best practices and research that's gone into this, saying that in an online course where you get a little bit less interaction than you would kind of by default in an in-person classroom, you have to be a little more intentional and put that sort of thing in there. So we'll be looking at that. Course tools, you know, which kind of course tools are you using? Do they fit? Do they make sense? Are they clearly articulated out for the students? The assessments, again, taking a look at the assessments with this rubric, if you read those 2 criteria points here, basically just taking a look at the alignment here, right? The alignment with the course content and the course learning outcomes, and then also just making sure that you display in some way some expectation for your students in terms of how they'll be graded. So whether we like it or not, a lot of students are very grade centered, and the assessments are a big piece of their learning as well, right? It's when they're kind of demonstrating to you either how they're learning throughout the course of the semester in terms of kind of a formative assessment, or at the end goal, have they learned what they needed to from this particular course? And so sharing that information with the students on how they'll be graded and what your expectations are can help them to succeed when they try to complete those assignments. And then the policies is the last section here. This one, pretty much everybody already has met most of these criteria, simply because there's a lot of boilerplate language that goes into the syllabus about student support services, about technical support, all of that sort of thing. So that's another quick category that we usually just plow, go right on through, and it's something you guys are already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, just to add one more point on the importance of rubrics from a student perspective, and I'm sure you often get this as faculty members, you have a student asking, well, what are you looking for? What's the minimum word requirement? You can save yourself a good amount of time by really investing in some of these structural components, specifically rubrics and outcomes, by being able to send them back to the rubrics. Like, everything's on the rubric of what I'm looking for and analyzing. To Ashley's point, students, for better or worse, are very grade centric. And so many of the questions you will get will be based on grades. And so as much as this might seem like it's a lot of upfront work, it is ultimately set up to make your life easier once the course is running.
Yeah, and meeting all of the criteria with your online course that's on this rubric will also help you, as I mentioned before, build what we call a user-friendly course. So it's including all of the relevant information. It is built in such a way that reduces student confusion. So we kind of always assume that students know how to navigate their way around an online course, because we assume that they grew up with technology and they're good at it. It doesn't necessarily always work out that way. And so if a student is focusing a lot on how to figure out how to do well in your course, instead of that means that they're not then focusing on the actual learning process, right? So they're spending their cognitive resources in the wrong area. And so the rubric here and this EOE initiative is designed to help reduce student confusion and roadblocks to learning, so that we can together as an institution support student success. Okay, and so I mentioned this briefly before. No, it's okay. I mentioned this briefly before. You know, when I was talking about the rubric on a previous slide, um, this rubric can be used if you are designing an online course from scratch. You can use it as a checklist to help you through the process of developing your online course. So you would just read, you know, the different criteria, build those different reference elements into your online course or into your syllabus. Some of them might go well in both places, the course site, either in Blackboard or Canvas and in the syllabus. Some are okay in one place or the other. And then just kind of go through the checklist that way. If you're not sure of a certain item on the rubric as you're building, you have a couple different options available to you. You can check with one of us through that email address that we shared before, and we will share it on a slide later as well. It's eoe@american.edu. Or every school now has its own embedded instructional designer. You can also reach out to them. They are familiar with the rubric.
Yeah, and that perfect segue actually into what to do. All right, so you've gone through the rubric and you can reach out to us, eoe@american.edu, and we can set up that one-on-one consultation and review. But we want to make sure that you have your course built out. And I'm glad Ashley mentioned to leverage the embedded instructional designers within your respective schools and colleges, as well as any other designers you might or might not be working with. Ashley and myself do have design skills, and we are in the thick of designing courses. But you know, to keep everyone in their respective areas, we request that you, when you come to us, that it's with a fully built out course, so that we can review and help you elevate it to the next level. So that's what we want to require, but we are available. We've already done quite a bit of one-on-one consultations with faculty members. And like we mentioned earlier, you know, we're well on our way to meeting our goal. Hopefully 50 courses could get certified by the end of the year. That's our ultimate goal. And hopefully you'll be a part of that, that achievement. So next, we do want to look in how EOE can support you.
So we've been talking a lot throughout this webinar about how designing courses based on EOE criteria can help your students learn. But we also want to spend some time talking about how this EOE initiative can help you with your teaching as well. So the first thing that it can help you with is designing a learner-centered online course. So for folks who have never really taught online before, a fully online course, it can be a little daunting. As Luis mentioned, it is a lot of upfront work. It is, it has to be by nature a lot more intentional. You have to think through all of these different things in a different way than you had to do when you were teaching face-to-face or even in a hybrid model. You know, and so this EOE can be a good place to start, you know, in developing a course design that'll help your students learn. It can also help you create an engaging experience. So we have heard all summer, we've been Luis and I and others on the learning design team have been doing webinars and workshops, and a common concern that we hear over and over and over is about student engagement. So how can we engage our students in an online course? Aspects of this rubric focus on increasing learner engagement from a variety of different angles. So the first being, as I mentioned, reducing roadblocks to learning. So I don't know about you, you've probably, I have certainly in my time come across students that as soon as they hit one roadblock, they're just kind of done. Like they don't really try that hard to get around that roadblock. They don't try to find an alternative. And so, you know, by reducing those and getting rid of those as much as you possibly can in your online course, you're going to help student engagement and help them kind of stick with it a little bit better than they might otherwise be. It's also taking a look at the content and how it aligns with the rubric, with the learning outcomes and the assessments so that students can see the value and see how all of these things are connected. If you attended the online summit that happened last week, they had a student panel. And one of the things that students were complaining about in terms of their spring experience was they called it make work. So I would call it busy work, but I guess maybe now we've shifted in the generation or something. So they called it make work. So they felt that a lot of the things that they were being asked to do didn't fit with the course. And so they didn't think they had to do them. And so their engagement dropped. And so by really kind of focusing on the design, focusing on how all of these certain pieces connect, and then showing your students clearly and concisely how all of those things connect can help reduce that feeling of busy work or make work that they were feeling in the spring with some of their courses. And then also, of course, interaction. So that was, we mentioned that a couple times with the rubric. That's one of the criteria, is including interactive activities and opportunities for students to work together on different projects and different challenges. That can also help with student engagement in the course. Sorry, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, actually, just because that reminded me of exercise that we did with the AUX team, and I think it's helpful to just think of interaction in 3 buckets. You have student to content interaction, so how students are interacting with your content. Then you have student to teacher interaction. How are they interacting with you, and provide a variety of methods for them to interact with you. And then ultimately, and sometimes we disregard this last bucket, which is student to student interaction. How often are you allowing students to interact with one another within the digital space? Maybe it's having their own forum, maybe it's creating a Slack page. So I think keeping interaction in simple buckets allows you to then focus. So, okay, how can I meet the criteria for this, and so on and so forth. So I think, try to simplify your life a little bit, because I think you can think of all the things that are available to you virtually in the internet, but just focus, how can they interact with me? How can they interact with each other? And what are the variety of ways they're interacting with the content?
Exactly. And then the next bullet point here, we've got streamlining your course. So I'm sure you've noticed by now, if you are designing online courses for the fall, it is a lot more upfront work than you may be used to. But if done well, your course can be a little bit streamlined and save you a little bit of time later on questions, on late work, on tracking down missing students, all of these sorts of things, because it's going to help focus your energies, both you and the students, on the business of learning and teaching. It can also, there was research earlier showing that the course structure can improve learner outcomes across the board, regarding learning, regarding satisfaction, regarding engagement, all of these sorts of things. And it can also help you programmatically. So if you're guaranteeing the consistency and the quality of the courses that you teach, and then perhaps others in your department get involved and they want to get their courses certified, what you're doing is building and creating an evidence-based process for learning quality for you as an instructor with your own individual courses. And then hopefully eventually, the Chief Online Officer's goal is to get this spread across multiple courses, so you get more students who are attending these high quality online courses, and then that helps you kind of showcase the quality of your existing and future online courses for you personally and for your department and your enrollments in the future. Yeah. And so EOE is designed for online courses. That is its main purpose. That is the way that we are introducing it right now this summer and for the fall. But what you may find is that by going through this process and taking a look at your online course design through this rubric, you may find that it influences your classroom practice as well. So I mentioned, and I do want to make it clear, that this rubric is focused on the design of your course and not your instructional practices or your delivery. But what we find when we work with online instructors on their online course design is that they choose to make some small changes or maybe different choices in the delivery as a result of this. And so there was a question in the chat box about the suitability of this initiative for the kind of post-COVID world, when we maybe all go back to normal, whatever that will look like in the future. So we will, there are instances in kind of historically working with CTRL on their online instructor course, we do find that people tend to make small changes in their teaching strategies when they're focusing very heavily on their course design as well.
And just to touch on that, showcasing the quality, Ashley, we've been working in the works of figuring out different ways. We have the digital badge that we created that you can put in your course, but working on different ways that we can recognize the efforts that all of you are doing to elevate the level of learning virtually for your students. We wanted to not go unrecognized. The efforts that you're putting forth because your students aren't the only ones experiencing change and conflict. All of us are experiencing that same change and conflict. And so we also think there's a wonderful opportunity to really just, celebrate the incredible faculty members that we have and the efforts that they're putting forth. And so Ashley and myself, we're ideating, we're thinking of different ways to, make this something worthwhile for you. And so that, you get recognized for the effort you put forth. So on the works, I don't want to share what we're trying to push through, but hopefully we will be able to, so we can really just recognize you for the efforts that you continue to demonstrate through this tough time. With that, we got to break up this one-way street of talking. We have a pretty intimate group. I don't know how many of you would feel comfortable talking, but we thought we'd have a break here to just have a discussion. We'd love to hear from you. And it goes back to that one of the first Mentimeter questions, not the Dennis Rodman, Moira Rose one, but the one about your goals for quality course design. How does this EOE, as we've presented to you now, how does it align with those current goals? Do you feel it does? Do you think it addresses some of those student engagement? Like I said, this is a living document, a living initiative, and we want your participation. So we want to hear your thoughts.
So I sent a copy of the rubric in the chat, so you can make references to it as you think it through. But yeah, we would love to hear from you. As Louise said, we've got kind of an intimate group here, a nice small group. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on how this reflects with your current goals, maybe what you're already doing that you'd like to share with other instructors that are here. We would like to hear your thoughts. So please be generous with your knowledge and your experiences.
Yeah.
Feel free to unmute yourselves and speak out loud or write something in the chat box. That works for us too.
Absolutely. Give it a moment here. And if you don't want to answer this specific question and just kind of gauge your initial thoughts with what we presented, any hesitations, concerns, we want this to be an open forum, sort of roundtable discussion.
Hi, this is Sonia. I haven't had a chance to really look at the attachment, the rubric, but I was wondering if you think it might work for the very first week of class to divide some of the rubric up with one section per different groups to go over and compare their section with the syllabus or Blackboard content to see if all of the needs are met.
Do you mean for all of the instructors teaching a particular course with you?
No, for the students, for the first week of class, instead of, as a checking for making sure that they're reading the syllabus and that they don't have any questions, of using the rubric to, as a guidance of, have you gone over the syllabus? Does it match these things listed in the section of the rubric that they would be given?
So we didn't necessarily intend for this to be student facing, this particular rubric, but I think that you definitely could use the different criteria that are listed out here as maybe a guide for a syllabus quiz or something like that. I think that could definitely work. Like, can you find, did you figure out how to navigate the course site? Were you able to find the instructor information? Were you able to find a course schedule and grading policy? I think that could work okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's actually, Sonja, I think you're spot on. I think that you might have encountered a bit of a gap. Maybe it would be effective to have a sort of student-facing checklist. I don't think EOE as is would be the best mechanism for that, but definitely brought up a good point to maybe think about what sort of checklist, because many of these students are online students for the very first time. To be honest, in my experience and Ashley's experience in distance education, online learning has always been for people who don't have access to the classroom for whatever reason, whether location, schedule, family, what have you. And so the flexibility is always a great selling point for online learning. How can we make online learning a positive experience for those who did have access, right? Who were the traditional students, the 18 to 22-year-olds. So that's a great point. I think even just having a basic checklist of what you would like your students to focus on that first week would be really effective. I think that's an effective practice. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I also enjoyed at one of the presentations last week, someone had the idea of making an FAQ page, kind of answering all of these things like, when are my assignments due? How much is each assignment worth? Even though it's in the syllabus, she stated that it was just very helpful for the students to get the same content in a different kind of structure, because a syllabus, especially an 8-page one, can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that is a pretty cool idea. Because, and then you can direct students to that page, maybe right from your first announcement or from the home page, maybe put those FAQs on the home page of your course. Yeah, I think that's a really great idea, because as Luis said, a lot of the students are going to be doing online learning for the very first time, and it does require a little bit more, you know, self-regulation, I suppose, maybe than an in-person one does. And so that can help with those questions and that anxiety.
Any other comments?
Luis, Ashley, thank you for sharing about this initiative. One thought that occurred to me, and this was from a comment you made at the very start, Luis, about the taken for granted assumptions of the physical classroom. And it occurs to me that maybe a resource that guides faculty to say, like, you might have been doing X practice in your face-to-face class. Here are ways that could translate to this item on the rubric. Kind of that direct sort of connection between those two pieces, so that it doesn't feel like you're necessarily moving wholesale into building something entirely new, but says, no, like, you've got at least like an inkling of what this is. Now here, let us help you translate that.
Very good idea. That is very clever. I think that just like a sort of cheat sheet, sorry, that's difficult for me to say, for faculty to just be able to translate, okay, I normally do this, and this is now what I can do, what's available to me in the virtual environment. Very good. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have that created. So my office and CTRL, we created a resource like that together in the spring. It does not align though with the EOE rubric, because that didn't exist yet when we had created it. Okay. So, but yeah, there is a Blackboard. I wonder if I could share the link, because it's self-enroll. Maybe you guys would be able to enroll, but yeah, it does. We organized it in exactly that way. Kind of, this is what you used to do. These are your options for doing it online. Maybe we should promote that a little bit more now that we're moving into the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe update it to include Canvas and this initiative, but great point.
And then a related thought was maybe to help with like accountability in the transition would be possibly to kind of create a schedule of sorts, sort of checkpoints in the fall semester of like, as you're building towards spring, like, here's about how much time we think this piece could take, that piece could take, which would allow for some community sort of accountability between each other as well, and conversation points to say like, hey, by September 15th, we were gonna have thought about this piece of it. And if we have questions, we can get together or share ideas with a mind to like, okay, now I'm ready to go in January for my spring course.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. We were thinking of putting together as part of this kind of a community of practice. So, I mean, maybe we could kind of combine what our idea was with that sort of a schedule, or almost maybe like a working group sort of situation. We'd have to play around with the ideas, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, be careful, Brad. You might be adding yourself to this committee. It's emerging, so keep coming up with it. It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to partner. I mean, we've been thinking a lot about how to make this transition, sort of capitalize on this moment for the core in some ways. And so if we can be partners here, we'd be happy to.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you. So we in the chat box, Buki or Bucky, I apologize if I didn't get that right. Said
Buki.
that Buki, perfect. Thank you. My
Thank
first
you.
instinct was right. So you mentioned in the chat that a lot of the practices are already implemented in the ELTA program.
Alto, yes. Mhm.
Yes, perfect. That is exactly what we like to hear, and it has been our experience kind of working with faculty members this summer. It looks daunting when you first look through it, because it is a lot of criteria that are on the rubric, even though we cut it down from some other rubrics that exist. But yeah, it does align with a lot of what many programs or many faculty members are already doing. So thank you for pointing that out for your particular experience.
I do have a second question. We do have a syllabus template that's given to us, but it's a bit long, and they kind of want us to write down every step. It's 14 pages right now, and that's just because I didn't include every single thing. So what do you think is a good length for syllabus length should be?
So I agree that sometimes the syllabi can be long, especially as you kind of look through this rubric. Some of the things that it would like you to include are like rubrics for all of the different assignments and components, or maybe a checklist or some sort of criteria for grading. Things like a class schedule, things like all of that boilerplate language that has to go in, things like the accommodations and the emergency preparedness, and you know, the counseling center, and all of these different things. I don't know that there is necessarily a right or wrong way or a perfect length, because there are arguments that can be made both ways, right? There are arguments that, oh, students don't really want to read this, so I'm going to make it as short as possible. But there are also a lot of good arguments to be made for including as much information as you can that will help a student understand fully what they are going to be asked to do going into the course. So that's not really a great answer.
Yeah, and I think it's increased. That's great, Ashley. I think it's increased a lot too, because there's also the method of legalities, and sometimes the syllabus can cover the instructor. If a student ever wants to complain or say something, you have this sort of document, and I've heard it be used in such a way like, oh, this is a contract for students ahead of time. So it really depends. I think, you know, like you don't necessarily, you can, I feel like linking out to policies is better than having to write them physically. And that way you're not having to update them every time they get updated, because you're linking them directly to the page. And that could shorten the length. I've seen it done in the school. I support SOE. So in some of the syllabus that I've been working on, just linking directly out to the university policy page to sort of shorten the length, but still, if the student wants that information, they'll still be linked out to get that information. So maybe finding little areas where you can, instead of, you know, writing out the whole policy or whatever's written, you can link out to a AU site would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and you can maybe
Great, thank you.
divvy up the information between your course site and your syllabus. So maybe some of the stuff you would want to include in your course site, maybe on a separate page somewhere in there, instead of putting it in your syllabus, or just refer students to that site in your syllabus could work too. We had a question in the chat box about accessibility. So thinking about accessibility and how it interacts with the EOE initiative. So you will notice, Andrew, as you look through the checklist, there are a couple aspects of the rubric, or a couple criteria that deal with accessibility. A few of them are in the content and activities area, namely taking a look at how readable the content and information is. So thinking about font size, thinking about font type, thinking about strategic use of colors, making sure that you don't have color combinations that might either kind of give off a kind of subliminal message of something you don't want. So I think sometimes we can think of all caps as screaming, or red has kind of a negative association when in terms of grading and things like that, but also combinations of colors that would be unreadable for some folks. Also looking at, are all the materials on your course that might need an alternative means of access, do they all have that alternative means of access? So for example, if you have a podcast, do you have a transcript for it? If you have a video, does it have captions? You know, any pictures on your site have descriptive or alternative text? So we will take a look at some of that. And then down in the policies section, there are 2 criteria here. Well, one of them has to do with accessibility policies and services. So are you providing that information for students as to the accessibility features of the tools that they're using? And also, if they need accommodations, do you have information in your syllabus or in your course site for them to know where to go to get that?
Yeah, really great question. Especially Harvard just had to settle their lawsuit for not being ADA compliant in their online learning. So definitely top of mind for Ashley and myself and a lot of the instructional designers at AU. And I always like to push this because it could get overwhelming sometimes to just think about ADA compliance. And essentially it just boils down to the text, you know, just have consistent text, the same color, preferably black. Images, making sure the images have the alt text, so you're describing the image that you're displaying, and then videos being captioned. And I think you just, you know, similar to the interaction piece, right? We can just simplify things and just focus our minds to just these 3 areas, then we're covered. And what can very well be an overwhelming feature, it can be done easily if you just think, okay, every image that I upload, I got to put alt text. In Canvas and Blackboard, it gives you the prompt to add the alt text every time you add an image. Take advantage of that. Kaltura, we have a wonderful tool that captions your videos automatically. So we're always pushing for you to upload any video lectures from Zoom into Kaltura, not just for file size purposes, but ultimately to get it captioned so that we can, you know, cover our online materials. So we have those resources for you. So I'm really glad that was brought up.
Thanks for covering the physical side of things. I was also sort of wondering about the learning design accessibility and whether there are sort of standard best practices for students who have learning disabilities, whether a course is better to be organized thematically or by week or by type of item. Are there recommendations as far as how that goes that make the course sort of easier to interact with for those students and for all students, I guess?
Yeah, so a lot of the components that are included in the rubric kind of deal with that on a particular level. So things like telling students where to find important information, like explicitly sharing that information with them so they're not confused as to where to go. Things like including the content, displaying the content in some sort of organized fashion. So a lot of the things on the rubric do touch on that to try to make it easier for folks of all backgrounds to be able to succeed in the course. And so there are things like that. As far as best practices for how to organize the course, the main advice that I would give is to chunk the information in a way that makes the most sense. For many people, many courses, they go through and they'll do a new topic every week. For other courses, they spend multiple weeks on a certain topic, like organized into maybe a theme, a module, a unit. So however you have your kind of schedule of your course and the content and themes of your course organized is a good way to put it together.
Andrew, I just shared a resource, UDL, Universal Design for Learning, that I think covers a lot of what you're looking for as far as design practices. And this is full-fledged. This is not just accommodations. This is just in general best practices for students. I personally like to refer back to as much as possible. And one of the areas that I'm particularly I get excited about is being able to allow your students to submit assignments in the way they want to. Meaning, if they want to do an audio file and just describe a question and answering that question through an audio file, you allow them to do so. If they want to record a video, you allow them to do so. If they want to write a poem or present a graphic design piece that illustrates and they're able to connect it back to the purpose of the original assignment, providing those sorts of options of what students can submit is a very powerful mechanism that we're just starting to scratch the surface on what that potential is. So that would be my suggestion. Check out this site. It's got a lot of great tips on designing for this sort of universal population. It encompasses accommodations. It encompasses culturally responsive practices. So really a wonderful resource for you to bookmark and check out.
Okay, I think we're supposed to end at 4:45, so I do want to make sure we hit the last two slides before we call
Let's
it
do
quits. But I don't know about Luis, I can't speak for him, but I can stick around a little bit late too if folks have more questions after. So we did want to just review real quick with you guys what are the next steps. Again, as I mentioned a couple times earlier, there's two main options, right? So if you're still designing your online course, if you're maybe looking forward to the spring semester, you can use the rubric as a sort of guideline or a set of like a checklist as you design your course. So that can be the starting point for you. And if you want help with your course build process and any kind of feedback or recommendations on your course design, we would advise you to contact your school's embedded instructional designer. So each school has one. And they are willing and ready for you guys to help out with any sort of design consultation or feedback or recommendation. Option two is if you are maybe already teaching this fall, you've got your course designed and fully built out on Canvas or Blackboard. In that case, you guys would be ready for the consultation and review process that is a part of EOE. And so we would like you guys to email, the address is EOE@American, to sign up and set up a time for review of your course. And either Luis or I will go through, kind of fine tooth comb, check out everything that you've got in there and how it aligns with the rubric. And so once all the criteria on the rubric are met with your course, you'll receive your digital badge of quality. All right, so here's our address one more time. Very easy, EOE@American.edu. And we wanted to thank you guys so much for coming today. We want to thank you for your attention and your interest in this initiative. And please feel free to either ask us any questions now if you can stick around, or you can also, if you've got to run, just email your questions to our email address.